Hey everyone, Mark and Steve here.
Before we get started today, we want to let you know about Dare to Connect, our new online interactive video platform.
For less than the cost of a therapy session, you and your spouse get live access to both of us 3 times a week.
Each 30-minute live group support session provides interactive mentoring and healing for addicts, spouses, and couples.
If you're loving our podcast and our unique style of bringing you recovery, you're going to love Dare to Connect.
To learn more, go to daretoconnectnow.com. We're looking forward to seeing and working with you. Hey everybody, I'm Steve Moore.
And I'm Mark Castleman.
We know the pain and heartbreak of porn and sex addiction.
And we know the triumph of breaking completely free.
Every day, we help our clients find hope and healing.
Join us in the fight to take back your life, your marriage, and be stronger than ever.
This is the PBSE Squared podcast.
So, Steve, we got a question from a listener this week in PBSE.
Mm-hmm.
And man, I got to tell you, I could relate to this one, not only from personal experience, but with so many clients that I've worked with.
Awesome.
So here's what he describes and then asks. He says, I'm a recovering sex and porn addict, working on my recovery and trying to reconcile with my wife and heal our marriage. She is constantly asking me questions as to why I looked at porn and webcams and also commented and looked at women with lust. I struggle to answer this question in a way that satisfies her, if that's even possible. Any way you can help us navigate this difficult question would be helpful. And when I read that, I was like, oh my gosh, yes. Trying to explain to my wife why I did all of the crazy, insane, cold, thoughtless, insane stuff that I did in addiction. How in the world do you explain that to a spouse? And I love what he said, in a way that will satisfy her.
Yeah.
And I would probably reword that. I wouldn't doubt if he also meant this in a way that she can understand, in a way that is sensitive to her, in a way that makes sense, right?
Makes sense.
Yeah. So
Yeah,
that was, and oh my gosh, how many women, Steve, have we worked with who are just like constantly saying, I don't understand. I don't understand. What was he thinking? How could this be? This isn't possible. This isn't the man that I know. This isn't the guy I married. And are just blindsided, right? Just shell-shocked.
Yes.
When this comes out.
Yeah.
So this is a good one to address.
It is. It's a big topic. And as always, we're going to just scratch the surface with this today, but there is some good stuff to talk about with this in terms of, some of the logic behind this, both on the addict and on the spouse part, I think, but also getting some actual answers for those listening too. We talk oftentimes on this program about this mindfulness concept, right? It's something that we mention probably at least every other session, every other episode. And mindfulness, right? This skill set that centers around what am I feeling and why am I feeling it? This emotional awareness, right? Understanding what makes us tick and the things that and why we do the things that we do and what emotions drive what responses, is a skill set that is hard to master for just your average person. In this busy world we live in, we so often run around in, we call it cruise control mode, where we're just kind of going through the day and getting things done. And it's very hard for most people, if you put them on the spot, generally speaking, if you say, how are you doing today? To get an answer that runs far beyond, fine or okay or great or not so good, these very general answers. For an addict,
oh man,
who has spent a lifetime running from and numbing out emotion,
Yes.
Trying to answer a question like that is an epic ask.
Well, and it's so easy to look at that question and think that it's very surface and I mean, it should be obvious, right? Because a lot of women I work with, look, I just want to know why you did that.
Mm-hmm.
And it just should be this simple, quick, direct answer. Here it is. And she goes, oh, yes. But it isn't that simple.
No.
And that's to say that addiction is simple. It isn't. And so there are many layers to peel back and look at with regard to this process. And unraveling all of that takes time.
It really does.
It takes time. It takes insight. By the way, that we don't have insight that we don't have early in the process.
Yes.
Right. And so it's kind of, and this is not at all to get on the case of the spouses listening. You have every right to know. You have every right to ask that question. But early in the process, and even sometimes right into the mid-range of recovery, it's an ask that doesn't have an answer.
Yeah.
We can't go there. I, as an addict, when I was asked, what were you thinking? Why are you doing this? What's going on with you? I would just look at people that would ask me with like a blank stare, because I didn't know.
Yeah.
I didn't know why. I'm like, right. And people take that as an excuse. Oh, you're just trying to skirt around the issue. You just don't want to face it. I can honestly say, talking right now on this podcast, that for a great length of time, I did not know.
Yes.
I couldn't tell you.
No, it's such a true statement. I think there, especially when you're early on, right?
Yeah.
And you're new at these skill sets. And it's not even just the skill set of mindfulness that we're talking about, right? Your shame is just crazy off the high, right?
So, yeah. I mean, when I say I didn't know, and there was a part of me that didn't want to know.
I don't want to know. No.
Yeah. Don't show that to me. That's, yeah.
No, you're absolutely totally. And so there's this real averseness to it, coupled with the lack of skills. And so it unraveling those reasons, what that kind of boils down to, really can, for all the reasons we've stated, and maybe some others we haven't covered, can take time.
Yes.
And it oftentimes also requires insight and sometimes help to be able to figure that out. This is where like an individual therapist can be really good, to be able to work with. Sometimes bumping up against people in a group or hearing other people's stories can be helpful.
Yes.
For addicts, we see that in 12-step groups all the time.
Yeah. Good. Being able to hear people talk who are 2, 3, 4, 5, 10 years down the road. And they can say, yeah, I didn't have a clue at first either. And then I started to discover why I did these things. And now 5 years later, a lot of those reasons weren't even the reasons.
Yeah. No, absolutely. In fact, on our Dare to Connect program, we actually have this really cool community that is sort of doing that, in the chat thread when we do our sessions in there, right? They're kind of sharing with each other and talking about what's worked for them, where things, why things like this have happened. There's a lot of cool insight there. We'd love to have you guys come join us, take a look at that with a 2-week trial. It's at daretoconnectnow.com. But yeah, there's a lot of skills, right, that are tied into that. And it will take time and insight to be able to get to the quote unquote reasons. The second component to this that is, I think, up that people are up against is this whole idea that addiction really, by definition, is insanity. Right?
Yes.
What that means is that even when we do start to identify the reasons, oftentimes those reasons won't be satisfying, quote unquote, because they will not make logical sense.
Yeah, and
you and I have tons of examples.
And this is a hard one because so here's my addict brain that is still in there, by the way. I can flip a little switch and say, hey, Mark, the addict, can we hear from you right now?
Yeah.
And I'm like, so this insanity thing. I can mount a defense based on insanity, an insanity plea. Right. And so if you're not careful, the addict brain will run with that and go, yep, I had no idea what I was doing. I was completely insane. So no accountability or responsibility. We're not saying that. But definitely addiction is insanity. Like if I look back right now to my deepest, darkest addiction days, there's truly a part of me, my higher, truer, sober, recovered self that just says, I have no idea who that guy was.
Yes.
It's shocking. It's shocking to look back and go, oh my gosh, I don't even know I don't know who that person was.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, do you feel that, Steve, where you look back and there's just like a horror side to this where you can't imagine how you could have gone that dark and that deep?
Yes. No. Yeah. No. You're absolutely right. There is that component to it, and even when you like we're talking about, sometimes that logic is so twisted, right, in the state of mind that we're in.
Yeah, you want to give a couple of examples from your memory banks of twisted addict logic?
Yeah, I know you've got some real zingers. I mean, I genuinely remember acting out with the excuse in mind of watching this porn is going to help me be better in bed with my wife. Like that was like my logic, right? I'm hurting the marriage to save the marriage.
Yes.
There's a Seinfeld episode. Though,
yep. There's addict logic. Try this one. Watching a Hollywood movie at the theater, an attractive actress is there in the movie. Not anything appropriate. She's just attractive. And so what does Mark's addict brain start saying? Well, you don't want to just objectify her, by just watching her in this movie. We need to go find out more about her. Who is she? What are her interests? Right? Go and look at her biography and go really find out some really, deep details about this actress so that you don't objectify her.
Isn't that wild? That's wild how
I'm going to not objectify her by going and objectifying her.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah, there's some addict logic.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I appreciate you saying that, because there's a lot of truth to that. And so, and for a spouse, right, on the spouse side of things, these are good examples of how even when we do quote unquote come up with the reasons, they won't make sense, which kind of speaks to what we oftentimes will educate wives on as we work with them, right, or spouses in this process, is that, some of his logic and reason, there are some answers to this that you may not be able to obtain in the way that you're wanting, right? Because if you are looking for something that's going to somehow make sense in the brain, there's an element to this that just might not, right? Some of it might not.
Well, and there's a caution to all those listening. If you're a spouse and you're thinking, or even an addict is struggling, if you have this expectation that once I know why, or once I know why he did this, that will be what fixes this, right? Getting to the real reasons, the actual logic, and then you can just say, okay, I understand all of it now. We're good.
Mm-hmm.
If we have that expectation that once we do is understand as much as we can and the facts have been put out on the table and it doesn't deliver that final sense of relief and we can move on and all's good now, when it doesn't do that, knowing everything, that's when things can become pretty hopeless.
Yeah.
And we caution you to be careful of that expectation.
For sure.
Now that's not saying there should be full disclosure.
Of course. Absolutely.
And we talk a lot about that. That's in our Dare to Connect program. We talk a lot about disclosure and what it is and how it works, but we're not saying that the facts don't need to come out on the table. And the spouse or partner shouldn't have her opportunity or his opportunity to ask all the questions they want and get them answered. That is part of this. But how do we develop? So let's say that has taken place. Mm-hmm. How do you develop safety after that?
Yeah, I mean, we do say it often, but safety is so much more about current trajectory, right, or the direction that we're going, and in the long run, less about facts of the past.
Yes,
but those facts do have value and they do contribute something, and they are an important part of the story and informing a base. But when we work with couples in the long run, that's inevitably what we see, right? It's all about, where are we trending, right? Where are we heading, and what direction are we going?
And sometimes, after we've done disclosure, we've thoroughly worked through it, a spouse has had the opportunity to really voice her feelings, and that's been done on an ongoing basis, often for months. You and I will work through with clients on this process for months, but there comes a place where you have to decide if you're willing to move forward. Because I've worked with addicts and spouses who get so stuck on the past that there's a part of them that refuses to let it go.
Mm-hmm.
They just keep dwelling on it and dwelling on it and dwelling on it, and they can't move forward, either from an addiction, recovery, sobriety standpoint, or a betrayal, trauma, healing.
Yes.
Just can't let go of it.
Yeah.
And now everybody better hear me. That's after total disclosure, full transparency, right? Weeks or months of getting to the bottom of it. And now it's like, okay, this has all been done. Sometimes including a polygraph, it's all done. And then sometimes it's like, I just can't let it go.
Yes. Well, and do keep in mind that safety piece we're talking about is multi-pronged as well, right? It's not just, for example, an ability to convey the past or talk about the past or be open to it, right? It's shame resiliency. It's being able to be grounded in, and consistent in what you say and do in the relationship in other areas.
Yes.
Follow through. It's empathy. There's so many pieces to it, right? Because there is no way at the end of the day, unfortunately, to prove, quote unquote, right, my spouse or my addict spouse is, quote unquote, sober.
No, there is no way to prove that.
There's no way to prove that. It's an endless guessing game, when we try to look at it from a factual based standpoint. But there are all these other components, right, to the recovery that he's working, all of the things that he is doing to change and to share and be transparent about his changes and the changes that he's making. Those are all those things that kind of coalesce, right? They're like little dewdrops, right? That kind of coalesce and form into that idea, that component of being able to say, yeah, this is a relationship I can continue to invest in.
Yeah. So for our listener who asked the original question, if he hasn't gone through a full disclosure and gotten hopefully some, therapeutic or professional help with that, if he hasn't gone through that process, he needs to, because that can be why a spouse keeps bringing up the past, because there's never been an actual formal disclosure. And so she has to keep wondering and guessing and, selective disclosure, disclosure over time where he only comes clean if she pounds him with interrogation. If that's what's happening, then a spouse will continue to wonder and ask and press. That's why the whole formal disclosure process is so important. So if he hasn't done it, he needs to, and then to be patient, because again, disclosure is not a one-time event. Spouses can continue to ask questions, and as more layers are peeled back, those guys in recovery listening, you hopefully are going to be patient with that process. We can't put a deadline on when your spouse is suddenly going to feel better.
Absolutely.
I don't know how long that's going to take. But as you're able to navigate through all that, Steve, I love your final part of this, and that is the best way to develop safety after all of that has taken place, or you're still in it, but you want to move forward, is what am I doing today and going forward in my recovery? As an addict in recovery, am I taking responsibility for my recovery efforts? Does my wife have to kick my butt, or do I proactively go after it? Do I tell her what I'm doing? Do I report my victories along with my slips or relapses? Right? This active, moving forward, focused recovery is the best way to get to safety, level by level, once everything's come out from the past.
That's a great
How do I go forward? You do it this way.
I love that. Awesome. Well, this is a tough topic, hard one to navigate among many. We appreciate you guys all being here with us today. Love seeing each of you each week, and so appreciate your desire to want to make changes here. But please, if you have issues or topics that you'd like to tackle here on the podcast, we always love to hear from you, whether it's feedback about the podcast or questions that you'd like addressed either from an addict or a spouse perspective. And you can find ways you can find out more about us, as well as connect with us over at our website at pbsepodcast.com, down at the submissions form button at the bottom.
All right. Sounds good, everybody. We'll catch up with you next time on PBSE.
All right. Take care. Everything expressed on the PBSE podcast are the opinions of the hosts and the participants and is for informational and educational purposes only. This podcast should not be considered mental health therapy or as a substitute thereof. It is strongly recommended that you seek out the clinical guidance of an individual qualified mental health professional. If you're experiencing thoughts of suicide, self-harm, or a desire to harm others, please dial 911 or go to your nearest emergency room.